So here's the Chair's report for the Hampstead Heath Survey Section for 2021. That's actually from the beginning of July 2020 until the 30th of June 2021. And for those of you who don't know, I think probably everybody does know where Hampstead Heath is. It's a large green space about 4 miles from the centre of London. It's probably the largest, most biodiverse green space near the centre of London. It covers about 320 hectares. So we're not giving any prizes if you can work out where this photo was taken at the beginning of last November with my 2 dogs in it. But that's looking towards Meg's Pond on the right-hand side there, with South Meadow with its trees beyond that. So what I'll do then is, because last year was a bit of a strange one really, because we didn't have any public engagement, and so any surveying that was done was very much just up to individuals or with 2 people who'd agreed together to go out and do the survey. So what I'll do is I'll just run through the different fauna and flora that we investigated in that process. So starting then with fungi, Mario Tortelli came over and did a couple of surveys, forays for fungi, and recorded over 123 species. 3 of those, I put in inverted commas, new to the heath. They're probably not new to the heath at all, but Andy Overall, who'd been doing the surveying for the last several decades, hadn't actually made a note of these 3. And the Plicatura crispa is an interesting one, because that's been moving down from Scotland through into the whole of the UK now. And then there were 3 that are fairly rarely recorded on the heath. Rhodotus palmatus, the wrinkled peach, is one that we do see quite a lot of on the dead elms. And we found 5 species of slime molds. Okay, so moving on to Bryophytes. This is Jeff Duckett's patch, and there was a first record on Hampstead Heath for 5 different species over the course of last year. One of them was only the second VC21 record. VC21 means Middlesex, which covers all of London and a wider area as well. And one of them, Polytrichum strictum, was the first record for VC21, and that actually appeared in the Sphagnum bog at Kenwood, where also there are interesting liverworts, Pellia nisiana, which are only found there in London, and the female plants, in fact, perhaps I shouldn't have put on there, because I think we detected those after the end of June. And then another one, Orthotrichum lyellii, was extinct in London in 1922, and it's now frequent on the heath. So this is another one which is on the increase again. Butterflies and bees then. Butterflies, Joe Maddox is in charge of monitoring the butterflies, and she was using a transect that she'd set up to survey as many of the different heath habitats as possible. And we were hoping that we might find 28 species, but I think 3 of those would be pretty lucky if we did see them. But given that there was some pretty dodgy weather this summer, 21 species were found, including the purple hair streak, where the colonies were mapped last summer, and the elms were mapped for future white letter hair streak surveys in 2022. Bees, Tony Madrick came in April on a really bad day, actually. It was very cold, but perhaps that was slightly in our favour, because the bees that were found were pretty sluggish. And so most of the ones were mining, where there were mining bees, the 6 Andrena species the 3 nomada parasitizing on the Andrina. Tony will correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then 3 bombus and an osmia. And Tony actually sent me a couple of photos that he took of the bees at that time. So I've just put those in. So this is a marvelous one. This is the Ashy mining bee, Andrina cineraria. And then I think this is Gwens mining bee, but let's go by the Latin name Andrina nitida. So those are gorgeous bees that we found on the heath. Dragonflies, wasn't because of the weather, it hasn't been a brilliant year for dragonflies, although last July, August was better than earlier this year. There are 16 species that were recorded on the heath, and of those, 7 were observed breeding. And that means that either they were copulating, ovipositing, or the exuvia were found on reeds and grasses around the edge of the pond. Spiders, David Carr comes quite frequently, in fact, to look for spiders, and 2 were first record on the heath, Anaphina sabina and Araneus tregutata. And then a nationally scarce one seems to be quite common on the heath, Nigma puella. And in fact, I took this photo and didn't know what it was and sent it to David. And so he was able to confirm what that one was. Let me have a look at the time. I think we're doing all right. Another big survey that was done earlier this year, so towards the end of the period that we're talking about, was a nesting bird survey that Jeff Varga set up. And there were a number of people going out in pairs to monitor the nesting birds throughout the breeding season and looking for activities related to breeding, like evidence of nest building, feeding, gathering food for nests, feeding young, and removing fecal pellets from nests. And the interesting thing is that 2 of the red-listed birds are nesting on the heath, the mistle thrush and the song thrush. And there are also a number of amber-listed birds nesting there, which is all very encouraging. And for the first time that we've been aware of it for a number of years, at any rate, the lesser whitethroat had a nest on the heath as well. So that was all very exciting. And the data from that is quite complicated, and so it's going to take a while to analyse. Reptiles and amphibians, this is the work of the voluntary organisation charity Heath Hands, of which I'm a volunteer, and these species were all seen over the course of the year. There's a large project ongoing over a couple of years to look at the mating behaviour of the common toad, Buffo buffo. So hopefully there'll be something to report on that next year when that project gets finished. And then lastly, I think mammals. I've just listed the species that are likely to be seen probably by everybody, and that we've all seen out on the heath. And the things like the field mouse and the vole and the common shrew are observed under the mats that are put down for snakes, most usually. And a muntjac I heard barking in Kenwood, but didn't actually see it. But the major activity has been a big project with ZSL, Chris Carbone, to monitor the hedgehogs on the heath and try to get an idea about how many there are. It looks like Hampstead Heath is a hotspot in London for hedgehogs, and so this is very important that we find ways to preserve their habitats as best we can. So 150 cameras were put in place and kept there for 3 weeks. And so every time anything went in front of them, the camera would trigger. And then, so that data is all still being analysed by Chris and his team at ZSL. So that will take considerable time to do, I think. Okay, so that was all I really wanted to say about the chair's report. Does anybody want to ask me any questions about that before we go on to any other business? I think we're fairly quiet on that. So probably we could finish the recording.